make sure you hit the like button as we kick off another edition of the Monty program. And this morning, it's very interesting. A new expose out from Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports, talking about a lot of the things that we have talked about on this show on a regular basis, and essentially questioning whether or not college football currently has a sustainable model. And in that article at Yahoo Sports, which you can find on my Twitter feed, The Monty Show, Monty, The Monty Show, you can hear from guys like Brett Yormark, who are openly talking about looking at their finances when the option pops up in 2027. And I think that's exactly what we're going to get. A lot of people felt like this new deal for the college football playoff and the extension and the revenue sharing, a lot of people felt like that was the end of the tumult. I've told you from the beginning, this is where it starts. This is not where it ends, because when you have the financial disparity that we are seeing in the college football playoff and the revenue sharing model, it's not sustainable, in my opinion. And I think it quite truly is the big word, like the existential crisis. It's a crisis of existence for college football. And whether it is all these NIL lawsuits that are going to come to pass over the late summer and fall, things are only beginning to change in college athletics. I don't believe the revenue model is sustainable. And when, not if, when the NCAA and its members lose these NIL lawsuits, considerable leverage will be had to institute yet another new revenue model and another new way of doing business in college football. And Jake, I guess my biggest question is, can college football survive as we know it?
I don't think long-term, it can in this type of situation. I think that there's too much heat. There's too much vitriol in the conversations. You look at this article from Ross, and he's talking about the fact that the prior commissioner, Bob Bowlesby of the Big 12, was really upset in conversations, about this distribution model and the fact that the SEC and the Big 10 were going to get way more money than the Big 12 and the ACC. And I think the hard part is it just feels like there hasn't been a level playing field in terms of trying to go out and make more money. And I think that's kind of what everybody wants on the field. The only problem with that is not everybody wants that from a money standpoint. You have the SEC and the Big 10 who are basically out here trying to leverage this thing for as much money as possible. And I think that's where, getting into other formats for college football and kind of deciding everything on the field kind of puts all the drama to bed. And that's why I think long-term, the current format doesn't really work, because you still have a lot of subjectivity. You still have, the college football playoff deciding, hey, who's in, who's out, who doesn't get access to the college football playoff money, and who does, and who gets these bonuses and who doesn't. And I think that's what's hard about the current situation, is that we're always going to have a Florida State. We're always going to have somebody who thinks that they were wronged because, they were left out of a field of, 12, 14, or 16 on any given year. And to me, that's where I think the sport is going to struggle. But the one thing you can't get away from is that the big dogs in the SEC and the Big 10 can go out and beat anybody on any given Saturday. And I think that's what's hard in the negotiating room to get away from. That, hey, Greg Sankey can say, hey, I've got Georgia sitting here. I've got Alabama sitting here. You don't. We should get paid more money because of that. And I think that's what that conundrum, that sort of situation, is what has to get figured out for college football to thrive long term.
Yeah, I don't know in the current model if there is thriving long term. When you look at this from Ross's article and you see the money that we're talking about, this is not thriving. And I think there is a belief that the SEC and the Big 10 are the behemoths in the room. I personally don't believe the Big 10 is one of the top 2 football conferences in the country. I think they are banking and being paid on future beliefs, if you will, or projections. You look at the fact that they are getting $23 million in the SEC, 20 to 21 in the Big 10. The ACC and the Big 12, 12 to 14 million. They're essentially getting half of what the SEC is getting. Notre Dame, if they make the playoffs, gets $18.5 million as an independent. It's wild to me that these are the numbers we're talking about, and people think this is sustainable. This is somehow a constant. And I'm here to tell you, this is not sustainable. It is not a constant. It is not a workable revenue model. There is no way that the Big 12 and the ACC, and of course, the ACC has all these issues with Clemson and Florida State, and there's no way that those two conferences can survive taking what amounts to half of what the SEC and the Big 10 are getting, especially when the Big 12 has been a better football conference than the Big 10. And I think by any measure, the Big 12 is the best basketball conference in the country. And yet you're not getting your share of the revenue. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how you explain that. I don't know how, and I think in this article as well, it is interesting that Brett Yormark talked about the fact that they're going to reevaluate everything for 2027 when they get that look in, when everybody does a check-in to see how's this revenue model working for you? Not well. Cannot afford diapers for the kids, right? Like that's what this is going to come down to in the Big 12. You cannot take a 50% haircut compared to your largest constituents, if you will, and peers that are supposed to be peers, but they're not. I just don't see any way that this is sustainable long term.
Well, and it just puts such an emphasis on winning in the college football playoff. I mean, that's the other hard part is like, I think we all agree that the Big 12 top to bottom is a better football conference than the Big 10. The only problem, of course, in the conversation is that the Big 10 has Ohio State and Michigan, who have obviously seen success for better or for worse in the college football playoff. And I think that is precisely the predicament of the college football playoff, is that you don't have to be a strong conference to get paid. You just simply have to have teams that go deep in the playoffs to get paid. And I think that's what's difficult. And I think when you look at conferences like the Big 12 or even the ACC, you have to have as many strong brands as possible, which is why we're often finding ourselves talking about the Baylors and the Texas Techs and, these folks in the Big 12 who, frankly, are just underachieving. They're just not holding up their end of the bargain. And I'm not saying that those two or anybody in the ACC should be out here competing for national championships, but it'd be nice if you were, competing, for your conference into the second half of the season. It'd be nice if, the conference was much more competitive than heading into this season, rather than everyone saying, well, Utah's going to be the cream of the crop in the Big 12 and we'll see what Okie State can do, but everyone else is just kind of, that's the problem for these two conferences. So yeah, you're right. They're going to look into this agreement in 2027. What other choice do they have?
I don't know how you wouldn't. And again, I will continue to say the inactivity in critical times, and Ross kind of talked about what we've talked about, is if Bob Bowlesby retired, essentially walked away from college sports because there was no way to get business done without putting a gun to somebody's head. And Bob Bowlesby is quoted in Ross's article talking about how at that big meeting where there was this heated debate, and Bob Bowlesby got up from the table and walked out of the room and left, packed his shit and left. And he did that out of frustration because there was no workable model or conversation to be had about moving forward. And then there's this debate about whether or not the SEC and the Big 10 would have gone and played on their own. And I'm telling you, they would have not, because that's not going to make them the most money. They had a deal in place for the college football playoff. That is the only stream of revenue that is going to maximize end results for everybody. And then I will continue to tell you that these NIL lawsuits are going to completely change the landscape of college athletics. All of that to say this current revenue system is not sustainable and will not, I don't believe, be long lasting. I don't believe we see the end of this contract.
Yeah, and I don't know how it's going to work for, the Big 12 and the ACC to try to get this setup shifted, because that's ultimately the fight that they're going to have to win is how do we go from where we are now to a new model, whether it's a super league situation or whatever it winds up being. How do we go from where we are now to something new that is more beneficial for the Big 12 and the ACC?
Yeah, I don't know.
And if you're a G5, you're just along for the ride, ultimately. And because ultimately, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are not going to want to go to a new model necessarily. I mean, they're obviously doing well on this model. Now, could they do better with private money in a different situation? Sure. Okay,
well, of
great.
course, yeah.
Of course, right? But I think that's the hard part if you're the SEC and the Big Ten, is you're almost obligated to fight for what you have now until you see something that is, no doubt about it, more beneficial for you. Like, how are we going to come to an agreement that's more beneficial than this one already is for these two? That's what I'm struggling with.
I don't know.
I don't know how you do that.
Well, and I think one of the things that's very interesting is this new deal, and the question about, is college football better off? It's not. And I also think the edge that the Big 12 and the SEC have, they are sales organizations. And the Big 10, to a lesser extent, and I think it's a far lesser extent, the SEC and the Big 12 are about revenue generation. That's what those two conferences are about. And I think this private money conversation that we're waiting on, these these NIL lawsuits that are, I think, so dramatically going to impact college sports. That's when the sales organization is going to have to kick in, because private money is coming to college football, whether you want it to or not. And I think when you look at the way that guys like Brett Yormark and Greg Sankey do business, they have big corporate sponsors. They have multiple sugar daddies that power their revenue. And I think you look at Mexico, you look at Rucker Park, you look at, Kansas City, you look at Pro Day in Dallas, and you look at all the initiatives that the Big 12 is after. You look at, the SEC trying to get back into Texas. That's all revenue generation. And the reason that's so important is because I was talking to a guy on TV yesterday who was telling me one of the conversations that is ongoing is revenue partnership on the branding side with these conferences and their TV partners. And having, the Big 12 bring in, let's use Dr. Pepper, a historical partner. But pick your corporate partner. But Dr. Pepper, it's a 5-year, called $50 million deal for round numbers. $10 million a year. $3 million of that goes to the Big 12. $7 million of that goes to TV, whatever the revenue split would be.
Sure.
So now, let's say the Big 12 brings that to the table. Now they get 7 and TV gets 3. But ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC bring Dr. Pepper to the table. They get 7. The Big 12 gets 3.
Mm-hmm.
It is a new way of doing business. And if you bring in oil money guy, or if you bring in, however that private money comes to bear, an equity firm, you are going to have to find a way to seamlessly integrate that into your made for TV games, which I think is simply a must. You must have Ohio State and Georgia playing in the biggest game of the year to kick off the season, to end the season, you got to have that. It is a must. And it's a must because TV needs that money. The bowls need that, or the conferences need that money. The universities need that money. It's huge. You got to have it.
Well, and I think that we're going that direction because up until this point, conferences have simply just relied on TV revenue. That they haven't, proactively, gone out and done serious sales business. Obviously, there's sponsorship at stadiums or, sponsorship here, sponsorship there, but there's not like big time, like, hey, we've got a dedicated staff of however many going out into the marketplace trying to get new money, new blood into the conference, and I think that's what's gonna have to take place. I mean, again,
Yes.
if you look at the concept of sales through college football, I mean, we could do probably 2 hours alone on the different ways you can sell the sport and from the different standpoints. Like NIL is sales. Like that's all that is. That's somebody saying, hey, like we've got an item, a product, we've got a service, we've got something that we want to either market or brand. And the best way we know how to do that is to go out and attach it to an athlete or have the athlete talk about it or whatever, right? I mean, that's all NIL is. I mean, it's like all these private jet companies, teaming up with the Arch Mannings of the world, all these quarterbacks. Like that's a great example of it. And
That's all.
And so the conferences need to go out and invest in something that then makes them money instead of being at the behest of TV companies to simply help them survive.
Well, I think there is also there's a shift coming that you're going to have to figure out how to get on top of it. If you're the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, you're going to have to figure out how to get on top of it, because there's also a belief that there could be a way where you own your conference TV rights, where you're the one buying that time or whatever that might. There's going to be an economic shift where not everybody is living and dying on money from ABC and ESPN, because that's essentially where you're at right now, with ABC and ESPN having the exclusive right to the college football playoff. And if you are the SEC, specifically the SEC, I think that a lot of your money is tied in the success and failure of ESPN. And I think that makes people nervous, as it should. Not that I think ESPN's going anywhere, because I think they are doing quite well, obviously, with the TV ratings that we've seen over the last 6 weeks. There is nobody making bigger made-for-TV events than ESPN and ABC. There's just no doubt about that. And the consumer's appetite for watching big events is unquestioned. I mean, how many women's sports believers are wearing Caitlin Clark jerseys today for the Indiana Fever, which outsold the Dallas Cowboys in 2 days? They sold more jerseys for Caitlin Clark than the Dallas Cowboys all of last year. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
That's a made-for-TV sale. That sale only happened, obviously, her talent and her ability, but that's not 65% of it even. 65% of it is the PR machine. That's how you sold all those jerseys. That's how the WNBA draft happened.
Yes.
Now you amp that up and you point that at a big college football game. You point that at made-for-TV matchups throughout the college football season. Now we're having a completely different conversation with corporate sponsors, private money. Like, you're going to, in my opinion, have a situation where you have a private entity that owns and operates the god tier of college football. I think that's where we're going. And it is going to be a for-profit business. And I think that the NCAA is going to survive and thrive post-NIL settlements. And I think a lot of that will be paid for by its members making money in football.
Well, and so then you can see, I mean, if that type of situation were to play out, now all of a sudden, conferences aren't so, desperate to figure out the new format, because it's like, hey, cool, this is the playoff format that we're playing in. This is the money we get from it. But we're going to stay more focused over here on our sales department and all the money and revenue we're bringing into our conference, because I'm telling you, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but it's going to happen, in my opinion, where you're going to have these conferences raking in, hundreds of millions of dollars in sales once they figure out how to do it, once they figure out the process.
Well, once they figure out what they're selling, because I think that's also a very big question. What are they selling? What is the commercial division at the Big 12 in college football? What are they selling? I'm not exactly sure. I obviously, you're selling your conference championship game. Obviously, you are selling your Big 12 basketball tournament. But there's got to be more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's and that's kind of to your point where you were talking about, hey, like the conferences and the TV partners need to get together so that the conference can say, hey, we've got this corporate sponsor who we'd like to sponsor this particular game that you guys have carriage on. Maybe it's we've seen this new wave at the professional level of, jersey stuff, right? Patches and branding and helmets and all of this stuff. I mean, I could easily see a conference figuring out a way to do a conference wide branding deal
But look at what ESPN does. Capital One Bowl Week.
Yeah.
Look at, rivalry week in basketball. Are you telling me that BYU in Utah doesn't have corporate sponsorship written all over it? Are you telling me that, the Bama Georgia game that should be played every single year? Are you telling me that, Washington State, Oregon State, like the biggest rivalries, you're telling me that those games don't have corporate sponsorship written all over it? That those games being played over a 2-week period in November doesn't have corporate sponsorship written all over it?
Yeah, I mean, they clearly do. And there's clearly opportunity.
I mean, that's the stuff you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, that opportunity has to be realized for not only conferences but schools to survive. And I look at, it's funny, we get this news the other day about, Kirk Schultz, basically stepping away after, I can't remember the date, but he's going to step away, he's going to resign or whatever. And I think that, the interesting part about that is like the athletic department at Washington State is still in the hole. It's not like that got fixed. And I look at this type of conversation we're having and I say, hey, like if you're in a position like Arizona is or Washington State, or if money is a struggle, like this, figuring this out is where the time should be spent right now. Like figuring out, how right now, even before any type of new sales structure would be put together with TV partners, how right now can we make more money through corporate sponsorship at the just the university level? Because if you can figure that out, you can dig out of a, again, all jokes aside, a $240 million mess up. Like you can dig out of that.
But if you think about, look at the Mountain West. If you're the pro rata you think you deserve, how does San Diego State make more money? Well, you've got Snapdragon, you've got this new stadium, right? You've got to win as many basketball games as you can, but you've got to go out and you've got to create a sellable product in Fresno, in Boise, in Logan, in these smaller markets. I think it is maybe more critically important in San Diego, Fresno, Boise, the small markets in Spokane. If you're Gonzaga, those are the markets where you have got to be able to create product and sell product that you can leverage for significant revenue streams. So all of that to say, I don't believe that any of that is currently possible. It's not currently possible because you're in a position where the TV companies and your TV partners are your overlords now. And I look at the SEC, and again, you are heavily reliant on ABC and ESPN.
Yeah.
Almost wholly reliant. Look at where that has gotten the ACC with this incredibly arduous grant of rights. You look at the Big 12, to a lesser extent, the Big 12, because they have other partners involved in, you have Fox to a lesser extent, but your basketball is so dominant right now in the Big 12. It is absolutely a revenue stream, and you can leverage that. The SEC can't say that. The SEC cannot say that. Now, the SEC obviously is a behemoth in football, and they're making more than anybody else by far. But I just think it's something we should all be looking at. All right. Less of us, more of you, as always. The Monty Show presented by Prize Picks, prizepicks.com. Off the schneid last night, thankfully, on the day where we passed 100,000 subscribers. I would like to personally, and from the very bottom of my heart, I would like to thank our good friends in San Diego that got a pretty good performance out of one Dylan Cease last night, who had 8 Ks on a 5.5 strikeout number.
Right.
I went more, which was absolutely positively boner inducing.
Boner inducing.
Yes. And then I would like a big shout out to the next great New York Knicks legend.
Shout out to Mo Bamba.
No, it's not Mo Bamba. It's Donovan Mitchell, who last night was at a 36.5 point number in points, rebounds, and assists. And I would like to point out that he came up just on top with that last assist that he got to get me to 235 and tied. Be pushed, so I didn't lose.
Right.
So Donovan, thank you. I would have won 3 for 3, and I would have only won because my guy,
your guy,
and wait until we get to the NBA coming up here in 30 minutes because I'm going to lose my mind. I'd like to shout out my guy, Anthony Davis, last night. If you're playing Prize Picks, Anthony Davis is a lock.
After the street closed Davis.
See, like some guys you play points, rebounds, and assists.
Yeah.
Other guys you just play points and rebounds. That's all you have to do. And Anthony Davis last night was 41.5. What do you think my guy did? 43. He came through.
The rack attack.
Now, he got inserted knuckle deep by the NBA officials.
Inserted knuckle deep.
It absolutely piped. Absolutely piped.
Damn.
Last night by the Lakers. And if one more of you hyenas rolls out the Garbo take that the NBA is trying to, the NBA, man. Let me tell you something. The NBA is trying to get the Lakers in.
Garbo take.
The NBA wants the Lakers to win. They're going to help them. How do you explain last night? Yeah, you can just take that Garbo take and you can throw that in your little pipe and smoke it. The NBA ain't helping the Lakers even a little bit. Well, Monty, that's because LeCap's this fucking asshole. Don't care. You can't have it both. And I love the guys on Twitter last night. We're like, oh, the NBA hates LeCap. Man, they want the Lakers to win. It's not. They're mutually exclusive. Do you want the Lakers to win? Apparently, the NBA does not. And not unapparently, pretty clearly, that's a Garbo take.
Yeah.
Like, get out of here with, oh, the NBA is trying to help the Lakers. No, they're not. As long as Anthony Davis won. So, yeah, your boy won $31.50. Thanks to Donnie pushing. So
Donnie pushing.
Yeah, that was one of those things where I was, and I wasn't watching the Cavs game last night. I was hitting golf balls.
Mm-hmm.
We were celebrating our 100,000 subscribers, and we just built this beautiful new studio, and spent tons of money on the show, which thank you guys very much, because good old Ed Wardley.
Ed, who are you?
He's Ed Wardley is one of the haters, right?
Shut the fuck up, Donnie.
Ed Wardley rolling up like, you guys got lucky, 100K. Okay, you don't get lucky.
Lucky.
Right? You don't spend all this money that you're looking at on this studio and get lucky.
Come on, guys.
It doesn't work that way.
Come on.
It does not work that way.
Be better.
Yeah. Hey, man, every show needs haters. Dude. Scary first one in. Mike Smith, Mountain Mama. Denver trades for Zach Wilson. Times are hard. Hit the like button. And
yes.
They got a pretty good deal. I mean, I think they're only paying $2.7 million of his salary. The Jets are picking up the other half. It's a win-win for them. OG Gary, college football is fine. It's only getting better.
Okay, well, you're going to have to explain that.
Yeah, you're going to have to explain that. It's Mike, not Mikkel Chase. Good morning. Hello. Maury Alvarez, a member of the show for 15 months.
Go, baby.
Hello. Congrats on 100K. Thank you very much, Maury. I appreciate that. Pete Forte, a member of the show for 5 months.
go, Pete.
Speaking of the pro rata, missed the live party yesterday. Congrats on 100K, Pete. Always appreciate you, man. Thank you.